And we are live. I'd like to welcome everybody to a very special edition of the Let's Talk Fishing podcast. My name is James. I'm going to be your host. With me tonight, I have a guy who's become a good friend of mine, a guy who doesn't live very far away from me down here in southern Louisiana, a guy by the name of Jered Fontenot from LA Bass. How are you doing tonight, Jered?
Doing well.
So you have some exciting news for the folks. You've teamed up with somebody, haven't you?
Yeah, so trying to do a revamp on LA Bass with COVID and everything going on these days. It's been a little bit tough to get products, so we finally got some new distributors and partnered up with some big names, and we have some really exciting things going forward into 2023.
That's exciting. So why don't you tell the folks what LA Bass is?
So LA Bass is a fishing apparel clothing line, and basically what our goal is to give a quality product to anglers for a discounted price, cheaper than your big name brands at the same quality. So we've been putting our heads together, and I've actually partnered up with some big names. We're partnering up this year with Elite Guide Service, Tyler Rivette.
Tyler is okay.
Yeah, Chris Thornton over at Cajun Tackle House. He's going to be partnering up with us. So what we're going to be doing with them is we're going to be doing a promotional calendar for 2023. So what happens is it's going to be a calendar that it'll feature all the local high school fishing teams in South Louisiana. And in each calendar issue, we'll have a different city. So right now we're doing Ascension, Baton Rouge, we're doing Livingston, and we have a few other cities. I don't have them on hand with me right now, but I think we have 5 total. And what's going to happen is it's going to be a promotional calendar that sells ads to local businesses, and we're going to donate 10% of the proceeds to all the high school fishing teams in that area who buy the ads. And then we'll showcase the anglers from the high school fishing team in the actual calendar. And then we're going to be doing some free seminars, and that's where Chris Thornton and Tyler Rivette's going to come into play. They're going to do these free seminars at the high school, so it'll be free to all the high school fishing kids and their parents to come out, ask questions, and learn as much as they can about the sport. And this is our way of giving back.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. So you're going to be turning. Man, that's some big names like Zach Gagnard from the Elite Guide Service over there on Toledo Bend.
Yeah.
But he's both a crappie and, recently he caught a 10-pound bass over there too.
Yeah, he's known to catch the double digits. I think he's got 3 or 4 hanging on his wall.
Yeah, I've talked to him before, man. That is one energetic guy. I'd love to fish with him, Actually, folks, Zach was supposed to be on tonight. He has a family emergency, and I told him, please take care of that. That's always more important than talking fishing. It's one of the few things in my life that's more important than talking fishing is family. So I always say that,
Absolutely.
Take care of your family first, guys. Take care of your family first. It's something I've forgotten. It's a good way to lose a family. But anyways, enough of that heavy stuff, man. Let's talk fun stuff. So you got this calendar. How can a guy get more information about this calendar if they want to sign up, Jered?
They could reach out to me on my Facebook page, which is Jered Fontenot Fishing, or they could reach out on the LA Bass group page, or they could send me an email to fishlabass@gmail.com.
Okay, that's fishlabass@gmail.com, folks. Or, you can see the crawler on the bottom of the page. It says Facebook LA Bass. I belong to that group, and, there's a lot of good stuff. I post most of my podcasts on that group. You've been really good about that. Thank you, Jered.
Thank you. Another good thing about the promo calendar is in the back of the calendar, along with all the companies that buy an advertisement, they'll have a bunch of coupons from those different businesses. So everybody will get a calendar. They'll have the calendars in each individual store that buys the ad. So when customers come in, they'll be able to grab a calendar for free, and they'll be able to see all the local high school kids. All the businesses that buy an ad will be featured on each month. And then the back of the calendar It'll have coupons, whatever coupon that company decides to pick for the back of the calendar. If they choose to, they'll get to put that in the calendar.
So where will folks pick up these calendars? Maybe you already said that. I apologize if you have.
So we will distribute them the week before 2023, and
Sure.
they'll be distributed to each company who buys an ad in the calendar.
Okay. So you're gonna distribute them to different
Correct.
businesses throughout the community that have invested in your
Correct.
enterprise here. Okay. That sounds great, man. Everybody needs calendars anyways,
Right, exactly. It's a free calendar, and everybody needs one. Everybody loves coupons,
Oh yeah.
And like I said before, it's another way for us to give back to the high school fishing teams. 10% of all of the proceeds are going to go back to the high school fishing teams, and that'll help these high school kids who can't afford. Who can go to travel.
Man, you're talking high school kids can't afford it. How about adults that can't afford it?
Exactly. And
Exactly.
I know
It's expensive, folks. I used to play that game, and I'll tell you what, man, thousands of dollars a year. And then that's, and these kids, they have an opportunity to get out there and do that. And, I don't know, probably a lot of you guys haven't witnessed this, but a high school fishing tournament where, the Bassmasters might have 200, 225. A high school tournament might have 350 boats. It's exciting, to say the least.
Right. And, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe each high school kid from the high school fishing circuit is required to get two sponsors, two $300 sponsorships or one $600.
It depends on what trail they're following.
Okay.
But, and also, man, that's hard to do, but some of them do. I have heard that before, Jered. I have heard that.
Correct. And that's where this came into play, where we decided to give 10% back to the high school kids, because if they can't find a sponsorship and their parents can't afford it, they could take this money and do with it whatever they want with it. Travel expenses, fishing gear, jerseys, whatever they want to do with it at the high school, help some of the underprivileged kids out. And that's our way of giving back.
That is giving back, man. That is.
And along with that, that's where the high school fishing seminars are going to come into play with Chris Thornton and Cajun Tackle and Tyler Rivette. So I'm excited about those too.
Tyler Rivette, I've been watching his career the last couple of years. There's a guy, he's sponsored by Walk-On's restaurant, and that's when a guy gets a non-industry sponsor. I respect the heck out of that. And Tyler's just a great ambassador of the bass fishing world.
Absolutely.
You guys really fortunate to have teamed up with him. He's doing very well. He's still a young man. He's going to be around for a long time.
Yeah, he's a crowd favorite for sure.
He really is. He really is. I've had him on the show a couple of times. But he's very successful, so he's busy.
Absolutely. I follow him, so I know the last couple of years he's had a great season, qualifying for the Classic and all that. I know everybody back home, all the local guys and fans are rooting him on,
Actually, speaking of the Elite Series, I had Derek Hudnall on, who was another local guy, He was on yesterday. We talked about the smallmouth. I call it the smallmouth swing, but actually it's a northern swing of the Elite Series, the Bassmaster Elite Series. And speaking of smallmouth bass, you were just at one of my favorite places in the world, which is Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. Man, Sturgeon Bay is just a special place for me. I've been going up there since, as long as I can remember. I started out fishing walleyes. It's a place that I could go and catch 8-pound walleyes within 6 hours of my house. Oh no, we just lost Jered, guys. Well, let's hope Jered comes back. There he is. No, there he isn't. There he is. Are you still there, Jered? Well, anyways, when Jered tries to get this figured out, guys, he went up to Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin to fish a Wisco, which is just a short Name
Can
from
you,
Wisconsin.
can you hear me? I lost you there for a
I
minute.
can hear you now. Yeah, you lost me. I don't know if that's you, me, or AT&T.
No, that was me. It muted my mic when I had a call. I tried to silence it, and I ended up silencing our podcast here. So apologies for that.
Well, I get about 2 or 3 calls every single podcast I do. People like to call me between 6 and 7. I guess that's prime time to call people.
Right, everybody's getting off work or off the water.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I was talking about the significance of Sturgeon Bay in my life, man. That's just one of the coolest places in the world. You know, one of the first times I went up there with a guy named Mike Norris, he's still a great friend of mine. But we were going into, I think, Ephraim, which is one of the harbors as you go up the Door County Peninsula, and all of a sudden I started hyperventilating, and Mike's friends asking me what's going on. Mike's asking me what's going on, and I saw a school of at least 200 smallmouth bass taken off, and every one of them was 3 to 5 pounds.
Yeah, it's a whole nother world up there.
Yeah, people from Louisiana can't understand this, but you can see a smallmouth bass on the bottom in 20 feet of water there.
Yeah, it's so I was in Sturgeon Bay up there in Wisconsin earlier this year, a few months ago, fishing that Wisco bass tournament they had up there.
Sure.
And when I got there, I mean, absolutely excited to fish for smallmouth. I've only done it 2 or 3 times before that. I've done it on some of these other lakes that aren't known for so much smallmouth. I've done it on Texoma, and I've done it on Tellico. And when
Tellico
I got
in Tennessee.
Sorry about that. When I got here, it was a whole nother world. It was like being on another planet. So basically, it was like fishing in the fish tank at Bass Pro Shop. I mean,
It's an aquarium. Yeah.
You could see 20 foot, and it looked like you were in 3 foot of water.
And you had fish there that you've never seen before, like walleyes and salmon and yellow perch. And
correct. It is a beautiful place. I highly recommend if you've never fished there or been up north that far to fish, it definitely was a bucket list for me, and I'd love to go back again and try and do it again.
And you know, the Door County after you get above Sturgeon Bay, it's like, you know, a place that if you went fishing, your wife could go up north in Door County, and she's not going to believe it either. There's all these quaint little shops that you can buy just about anything. Like there's a place that only sells olive oils and balsamic vinegars. Is, you know, I used to go every year when I went up there. You know, that's a place that I can buy marinades for my deer meat. And
yeah,
cool place in the world.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy.
If you go up there, do not go to a fish boil. Boiled fish. It's the Norwegians who are putting it on, and they're used to eating boiled fish. They've been eating it since they were young, and so it's something a lot different than what we're used to.
That's what I'm about to ask you. I don't know what a fish boil is. I know what a crawfish boil is. We do that a lot here, but maybe you can explain it to me and anybody else listening.
They have this big iron thing that they put the fish in, the water in, and the spices in, and they put it right on the fire. And when it's been on the fire for a certain amount of time, they take it off and they start taking the boiled fish out and putting it on plates with other stuff. And I went there one time and I ate whatever else they had there, but other than the boiled fish. And the woman I was dating at the time ended up eating half of what I had.
So is it pretty good, a fish boil, or is it not good?
No, it's not good.
Awful. Okay. All right. I'll keep that in mind next time I'm there, not to get the fish boil.
Jered, you like to eat fish that has been highly spiced, and you know, like blackened fish or fried fish. And
yeah, my go-to, I mean, I can't tell you the last time I ate bass. I mean, it's probably been 20 years before I started fishing. You know, I try and have respect for the sport, and
yes,
I absolutely love catching them, so I try and get them back in the water. But if I'm going to eat some type of fish in South Louisiana, it's typically redfish on the half shell. That's my go-to.
I love redfish on the half shell. You just put a little bit of butter that has some rosemary in it and
Yeah.
garlic, and you just kind of put that on the grill, and then you sit there and squeeze lemon on it while it's baking while it's grilling for about 5 minutes, and that's it.
Yeah, you can't beat it. You sure can't beat it.
That's some, as you guys eat on, that's some good eating right there.
Absolutely. That's my go-to. You can't beat the fight from a redfish. Closest thing to that would probably be those angry little smallmouth. I had a tough time with them up in Wisconsin day one of that tournament.
I bet you did. Well, the thing I think is the closest to a redfish is actually the common carp up north.
Yeah, I've never really got into it. I know a lot of guys love the fight and the sport of that. I never really got into it. Maybe one.
I caught a lot of them by accident, particularly in the springtime when I was fishing for smallmouth bass with lipless crankbaits.
Oh wow.
They're in there and they have eggs in their bellies and they're looking for something to eat, and I don't know why they grabbed them, but every time I hooked in, I thought I had finally hooked in like a 30-pound muskie.
Oh cow.
Something else that lives in Green Bay.
Yeah, I have enough trouble trying to figure out these largemouth and smallmouth bass. So until I could figure these guys out consistently and be competitive, I don't plan on really adding any other species to.
I don't either. Well, I'm from the north. I'm from that area. I grew up fishing Green Bay. Coming down here, you talk about a different world. These fish are so much harder to catch than the fish up north. Maybe it's because I have 45 years of experience of fishing for them up north.
Right.
I got used to it, but you have more cover down here. And
the water clarity.
The water clarity is completely different. You're exactly right with that. And also the structure that really holds fish is more subtle than it is up north. Up north, as you look for a rock bar. And you go over the rock bar, and there they are. You can see them on your locator. There's 6 of them.
Something that's helped me up north is transitional bottoms. Going from sand or crushed rock to boulder.
Yes, chunk rock to crushed rock, boulders. If you find an isolated boulder, it's going to hold a smallmouth bass if it's a great smallmouth bass area to begin with.
Correct. And
in fact, that's how we did it back in the old days. We go along. Look. There's one. There's a boulder, and when we back off of it and cast to it.
Right. And up north, that's one thing I learned real quick. With the water so clear, I always want to try and predict where a bass is going to be on a particular pattern. But even more so when that water is crystal clear, if they see you, you don't stand a chance.
Yep. Smallmouth bass they don't tend to be as spooky as largemouths. They're just plain mean. I've had 6 of them. One thing that's really cool is in the springtime, especially when you're casting something like a lipless crankbait, they'll follow it. And sometimes there's 6 of them following, or if one of them grabs it, 6 of them will try to grab that crankbait out of its mouth.
Right.
It's just thrilling to watch that. And last night Derek Hudnall was telling me that's one of the ways he was using a jackhammer in the St. Lawrence, and he just reeled that, and a lot of times the big ones would follow it in, and he could sit there and watch. And then he didn't want to catch that fish. It's the practice period, but he knows where that fish is now.
Right.
But also think about smallmouth basses. They're much more of a migratory fish than largemouths are. So they could be here today, gone tomorrow, here today, and gone 15 minutes from now, just depending on their mood.
Right, exactly. I've learned that too. That happened to me on Texoma.
So what was your go-to presentation up on Sturgeon Bay?
In Wisconsin, so my absolute favorite there, I threw a Ned rig, and I would take a green pumpkin Mardi Gras Cinco and cut it in half and put it on a Ned rig, and I'd sling it pretty much as far as you could possibly throw it. That way they wouldn't see you. I was fishing these big sand flats,
And how
maybe
deep the water?
about 3 foot of water.
3 foot.
There were beds everywhere. They were spawning time. So I had a medium light spin cast set up. I had 10-pound main line with 7-pound FC Sniper leader on there, and then my little Ned rig, and I was cutting those Cincos in half and slinging it. Basically trying to mimic a goby is what they were feeding on. Their major food source up there was goby.
Did you use any floating soft plastics for your Ned rig?
No, not really. So day one, I went out after smallmouth because it's not often I get to smallmouth fish, and the only thing I could really relate it to is sac-a-lait or crappie fishing down south. Real light tackle, light gear, smaller baits. And day one, we went out there and we caught a ton of fish. I think we weighed almost 15 pounds of smallmouth.
Nice.
Which, for me, I was super happy. Caught a ton of fish, just never really got that real big bite. And so day two, when we went back out, I pulled a little bit of an audible. And I know Sturgeon Bay is not known for largemouth fishing. So some people probably thought I was crazy, but I decided to find a little bit dirtier water in the backs of some of these little creeks off the lake and try and find some kind of structure and dingier water with some kind of vegetation. And basically, when we took off at launch, everybody else ran out across the lake, and I idled to the back right near the launch. I maybe went 5 minutes, and I found a little bitty canal, maybe 100, 200 yards long, had some boathouses, had some little laydowns going in there, and a ton of vegetation and a few little laydowns. And so I power pulled down at the mouth of that little canal, and I must have sat there for, I kid you not, probably 6 hours and never moved, throwing a weightless Cinco wacky rig and just skipping it up next to the docks and these laydowns. And it was probably the most largemouth I've ever caught in one tiny area in my entire life. I mean, I must have caught 100 plus largemouth, and they were all 2.5 to 3 pound largemouth, to the point where I had my coal beam out and they were just all the same exact size, just dead even. So I had a couple hours left on day two of the tournament and decided to make my way further back into this cove, thinking maybe some of these bigger females will be in the back bedded up. And as I made my way back, they got smaller and smaller and smaller. It was more buck bass back there. So I decided to turn around once I got to the end of it and didn't see what I liked or what I wanted, and started where I was catching those 2.5, 3 pound fish, and went the opposite way towards the mouth, towards the points of that little canal. And maybe 5 minutes in, I stick a 4.5 pounder, and then almost a 6 pound largemouth on Sturgeon Bay, which is unheard of. And I ended up weighing right at 20 pound sack of largemouth that day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's one thing. You just hit on something that's the big difference between the northern bass fishing and southern bass fishing. In the north, the bass tend to really, really concentrate in areas. And I have done the same thing, not very far away from where you were at on the Winnebago chain. I was fishing a bass tournament in August, and I found we didn't do real well in practice, so I decided to just go with the safe thing. I found a big bay just like you did, and I went in it and started fishing, secondary bays off the side of this big bay, and I caught over 100 fish that day. But they were all 2.5, 3 pounders. I didn't catch a kicker like you did.
Yeah, it was crazy the way it worked. I mean, they weren't real aggressive. Back home, you would assume it was a sac-a-lait or crappie or goggle-eye, a panfish machine gun hitting these little baits, because that almost 6 pound largemouth was biting the exact same way as those 2 and 3 pound fish. And it wasn't typical to the bite that I'm used to down south. I'm used to them grabbing it and hauling butt with it, or just holding it in their mouth, and that you could just feel them just tap, 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 that machine gun type bite. And eventually they would finally take it. But I wasn't expecting almost 6 pound largemouth on Sturgeon Bay. It's just unheard of.
They're
Yeah,
there. And you
I,
Northern boys have showed us that, like Brock Mosley getting a third in the Elite Series, on a couple years ago, largemouth bass. It man, they're there. It's just pe- people don't look for them. The Northern guys, they want their walleyes, they want their smallmouth bass, and they get very focused
yeah,
and look for things like you looked for. I never would have. I would have been on my way north. Get the heck out of Sturgeon Bay and turn right, go north.
right. Now that was my issue with chasing smallmouth. Those smallmouth congregate so tight that time of year, or the few times I fish them, they're so schooled up in such concentrated areas. I mean, I was fishing with 30, 40, 50 other boats in the same area, and the boat pressure had a lot to do with it. I mean, it was luck of the draw on what you were going to get. You were going to catch a bunch of fish, but I just couldn't depend on that day too, and that's why I decided to go back, towards my roots and go after largemouth and find that dirty water. And when I tell you, it was a dream come true to be able to catch those fish up north like that, and just see the reaction of all the other guys when I brought those big largemouth to the scale. It was amazing. It was awesome.
That is. This is a story, man. I love it when people do something a little different.
Yeah,
I've talked to so many guys who catch, they caught smallmouth bass on Green Bay, and that's a story in itself. But largemouth bass in Green Bay, you're talking headlines.
yeah. I actually missed big bass by less than 3 ounces. 608 was the big bass on day two, and my largemouth was 578, I believe.
See that, man? That's a big story. That's a
Yeah,
big story because that far north, a largemouth bass that big, that's a monster. I fished up there all my life till I moved down here. So from the first 45 years of my life, I fished up there, and the biggest bass I ever caught was 7 pounds, and that's a freaking pig up there.
oh yeah. I mean, that's a
But
double.
to catch that during a tournament, wow.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to explain to some of the people back home that really don't fish too much. You catch a 6, 7 pound largemouth on these northern lakes up there. That's a double digit on Rayburn.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking a 12 pounder, man. Yeah, it just doesn't happen. It just particularly a cold water fishery like Green Bay, because that's where it was. You can call it Sturgeon Bay, but it's part of Lake Michigan.
Correct.
It's part of Lake Michigan. And guys, if you were on Winnebago, it'd be a lot easier to believe that you caught a 6 pound largemouth, because Winnebago is a shallow water fishery, and it's just stocked full of both largemouth and smallmouth bass. Well, Sturgeon Bay, I have never caught a small or largemouth bass on there. Of course, I've never fished for them like you did. I
Yeah,
never would have thought about going to a place like that unless I'm casting over to cabbage weed for muskies. And I've done that twice in my life. I don't like. I'm not that I don't like muskies. I just like you. I have to stay focused because there's just not enough time. There's not enough 24 hours in a day to fish for every fish I want to fish.
exactly. Just the ones that count.
Yeah, and I mean, even when I'm recreational fishing, if I get up on Sturgeon Bay, man, I'm focused. I want to catch me another 6 pound smallmouth bass, just because. Just like going to that would be like going to Kissimmee and fishing for catfish.
Right.
Why would you do that? They're there. There's enormous ones there, but there's also 12 pound largemouth, and that's what I want. That's what I want.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But also, there are 7 pound smallmouths on the Green Bay fishery.
I'll tell you another place that was really fun to fish. I was up at ICAST a couple months ago in Florida and got to fish the ICAST Cup Series. I mean, ICAST.
Cool.
It was
Yeah.
that full shootout. It benefited. I forget what exactly it benefited, but it was, I believe, kids that couldn't afford to fish. because one of the proceeds went to a charity. There was no prize for us. It was just a 4-hour shootout, and best
4
three.
hours. That's stressful, huh?
Oh my God! So it was the first time I've ever fished Toho to begin with, but it was also the first place I was able to fish outside of Louisiana that set up the way I learned how to fish, which was shallow, heavy cover. So I was excited about that. So I only had 1 day to practice, so I went out there and kind of played around. I found one little canal off the lake that had some current ripping, and I knew exactly what to do was fish the current break side of these cypress trees and lay downs. And when I tell you I laid into some nice fish, it was really fun. In practice, I caught one a little over 6, and then best 3 on tournament day, I think we had a little over 11 pounds or something like that. 5-1 was my big bass for the 3 fish. And I know there's way bigger fish on that lake, but it's an absolutely incredible place to fish.
That is cool. So what were you catching your fish using?
I was doing what I would have done on Lake Verret or Gibson. I was flipping 20-pound fluorocarbon on a 1/4 ounce tungsten. I was throwing a 4.0 offset hook, and I was throwing a black, one of the Cajun lure, black and blue crawfish creature baits.
So that's the crackling claw.
I believe so. Yeah, I pull everything out of my.
If that's their crawfish lure.
Yeah,
It's a
I love them.
claw. If it's their creature bait, it's the Kushan.
Right. I like theirs. It's a little bit beefier than a speed crawl or something like that. I like a beefier bait when I'm flipping stuff like that. A little bit larger profile, and
Well, Zach Dubois does a good job. You know, I've caught a lot of stuff on his Baton Junior. You were talking about wacky rigging a little earlier. His Baton Junior sinks very, very, very slowly, and I like that when I'm targeting southern Louisiana bass in 1.5 feet of water, because
right.
a lot of people say no, I like it. I like the reaction bites because then it if it sinks quickly, then the bass grab it. And I said, well, if it sinks slowly, they grab it too.
Yeah, some days I've learned that over the last few years, figuring things out in practice. I'll have different size weights tied on because sometimes they want it falling slow, and sometimes they won't touch it. They want it a little bit faster. So I'll work my way up the different weights until I figure out exactly what they want.
Yeah, I like the weightless wacky rig, particularly around cypress trees, just in 1.5 feet of water, because it just.
Right. Now I was with a 1/4 ounce weight. I couldn't have got away with anything less than that on Toho because the current was ripping so hard.
Very good point. Good point.
It was pulling my 1/4 ounce weight, so the bite wasn't real aggressive. When I'd flip the current break side of these trees, when I bumped it, out a little bit, my bait would take off. But most of the time, it was the current. Now, when my bait stopped, when it came out in the current, 2 things: either I'm hooked on a tree or some kind of structure, or that was a fish holding it. And I'd say 75 to 80% of the time, the fish I was catching, I never felt them bite it or play with it. It would just come to a complete stop in that current, and I knew they were holding it.
So I've never been to Toho. Is that a tidal fishery?
I don't know too much about it. I just know it's a real shallow, flat fishery. There's not much happening. It's not very deep. It's not like these deep reservoirs like Toledo or Rayburn or Lake of the Ponds or Texoma. It's pretty much just a big flat lake with just about every kind of vegetation you could dream of.
So is it kind of like the Henderson, where you have to find moving water?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to do too much graphing on this lake. I think that the deepest brush pile I found was 5 or 6 foot. I mean, now I know it gets a little bit deeper than that, but it's not a very, very deep fishery like the rest of these deep reservoirs that they fish down south, or that's on my schedule.
Sure.
But
That sounds interesting. Interesting. That sounds interesting. I'd like to go there someday. The thing I like about Florida, I fished Florida. I fished the Harris Lake chain quite a few times. My dad lived right on Griffin Lake,
Right.
so
The only thing I could say is it can make it pretty tough. I know getting out there for the first time on that lake, it's just so much vegetation on that lake. It's hard to pinpoint exactly where these fish are at this particular time. That's why I went straight for the canal. When I looked at my map and I could see this little canal, when I got there and saw cypress trees and knees and laydowns and the current ripping, I knew I was in the right place for the way I
yes,
like to.
if you can find current, that's
Exactly.
I know because I would feel at home there. Well, I fished Florida quite a few times, but nowhere near as many times I fished the Henderson, and that's current is the key for the Henderson.
Right. The only other thing, if I wouldn't have found that canal, the only other thing I could think of, I know bass like transitional banks, and when you got that much vegetation, different types of vegetation, if it transitions from, sawgrass to hydrilla or any two different types, the bottom contour is going to be hard and soft or vice versa when it transitions. So that would have been my next go-to, but thank God I found something that catered to the way I learned how to fish.
Two things I've learned as similarities between Florida and Louisiana is you want to look for a real shoreline, because a lot of the shorelines are just, I call them fake shorelines. They're nothing but vegetation, a clump of vegetation right here.
Right.
And also in Florida, one thing I found, if you find a isolated patch of emergent vegetation, the first thing I noticed when I got on there with my dad the first time is there's five guys fishing. Are they crappie fishing, Dad? No, they're bass fishing. Wow, let's find one like that and fish it. I'm not going to go there and join the pack, but I am going to look for something similar.
Right. Right.
You got 50,000 acres there on Griffin Lake. I don't need to fish. I don't need to fish like I used to walleye fish in Illinois. Where you're getting a pack of 60 boats and
Yeah, that's how it was smallmouth fishing it. And
yeah,
I didn't,
and
I
those boys are used to that, man. That's how a lot of times walleye fishing, the walleyes come in a huge pack, and the pack is always moving. So you kind of watch for bent over rods.
Right. Right.
It's not. A lot of guys don't like that, but if you grew up doing it, you don't know any different. That's the way I was.
Yeah, and that was my big thing once I started competitive bass fishing, being on the Toyota series now. It was completely different. It was almost a culture shock going from fishing shallow South Louisiana. You're fishing, 2-3 foot of water structure you see with your eyes, and then all the deep reservoirs we're fishing on my schedule, like Sam Rayburn. You're nowhere near the bank 90% of the time. Now for pre-spawn and shad spawn, you're going to be up shallow, but 90% of the time you're several hundred yards from a bank and you're fishing 20-30 foot of water structure you can't see with your eyes. You're using the graph. So
That's one
I've
thing I
grown
am
to
used
love,
to.
yeah, I've grown to love deep fishing now. So why cover water and fish blindly when you could fish these high percentage areas or graph these high percentage areas on these deep lakes, whether it's main lake points or different types of contours and drop offs or offshore brush piles, whatever it may be. You're not going to pick up your rod and throw a bait if you don't see anything down there. So
Yep. That's why a lot of these
I've grown,
guys, when I fish with them, they ask me, "You don't know how to skip?" I'm like, "We don't skip up north. You're fishing an area, that might be several square miles. If you got these bays and the whole thing is covered with submergent vegetation. You don't need to be a precision caster.
right.
You just lop it out there and bring it back. You see a fish at this angle, and it's 60 feet out there.
I think they call that throw and pray, right?
Well, which angle you want to throw it at, and you know which area you want it to land in.
That's
Yeah,
what I like forward facing sonar with live
yeah,
scope, 360, or whichever one whichever forward facing sonar you use. You actually, when you graph over a brush pile or a main lake point or whatever, a school of fish just in general, you drop your trolling motor, you spin around, you could see, hey, they're 30, 40, 50 foot out and how deep they are. I mean, it just eliminates a huge, it eliminates a lot of the guessing, that you run into when you got your trolling motor on 6 and you burning down bank, just throwing a big power fish bait, whatever it may be.
sure.
And I know there's a time and a place for that every year. Like I said before, around that shad spawn, you're not going to be graphing shallow water around the shad spawn or pre-spawn for largemouth. But other than that, it eliminates a lot of the guessing when you're fishing deep and you come over, whatever it may be, and you see that big school of fish. You know exactly where they're at, and then all you got to do is figure out, hey, what do they want to eat today?
Well, why don't you tell the folks about your calendar again before we do shout outs?
Okay, yeah. So next year in 2023, we're going to be releasing a promotional calendar with LA Bass. So basically, all the local businesses will buy ad space in this calendar, and it'll feature local high school fishing teams in each individual calendar. If you buy an ad in the calendar, you'll get a coupon space in the back of the book. All the businesses that buy a calendar ad space will get the free calendars in their particular store next year in 2023. So people can come in, they'll grab a calendar for free. They'll see the high school fishing teams. They'll see all the ads of companies that bought at other locations, and then they'll get free coupons in the back of the book. 10% of the proceeds will also be going back to the high schools. That's our way of giving back. So combined, all the money we receive from the companies that buy ads in the calendar, we're going to donate 10% to all of the local high school fishing teams around those particular businesses.
So this is in southern Louisiana, then?
Correct.
Okay.
And we're in 5 different cities currently.
Okay.
Some are parishes that have multiple cities, and some are just big enough cities that we don't have to do the parish. And then along with that, another way we're going to be giving back is how we're partnering up with Tyler Rivette and Chris Thornton over at Cajun Tackle House. And we're going to be doing these free high school seminars, fishing seminars for the high school kids, and their parents could come to. And they can come out, and learn a lot about the sport, talk to, very knowledgeable guys who are actually fishing professionally, and then learn a lot. And that's our way of giving back.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I know you're a very busy guy. Appreciate you coming on and telling the folks about your endeavors and talking some good fishing, man. I really enjoyed having you. One thing I like to do is how I close each show is I ask my guests if you'd like to do any shout outs, any thank yous to any organizations, companies, individuals, clubs.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody that supported me this year and the year before. We'll start with Jaboom Bait Company.
Sure.
Southern Punch, Fred's on the River. We got Thunder Rocket Lures. Who else do we have? Level 7 Outdoors. I'll be partnering up with them this year and next. Elite Guide Service.
Our friend Zach.
I believe that's it. Sorry. My big sponsor, the most important of all, Cutting Edge Construction. They have done great things for me this year.
Well, that's fantastic. Guys, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to the Let's Talk Fishing video podcast. The Let's Talk Fishing video podcast, folks, is brought to you by Grant Lures. Grant Lures. I can't believe I flubbed that one so badly. Grant Rods, GrandTRods.com, Grant Rods. Crusher Lures, and the American Bass Club, theamericanbassclub.com, crusherlures.com, grantrods.com. And Jered, please stick around after I end the podcast. But you know what, guys? Weekend's coming up. Go out there and do some fishing. Have some fun. You only get to do this once.